Hello there and welcome back to my channel. Now this is a video I've been wanting to make for ages and ages, going over some of my top tips in Logic Pro to supercharge your workflows. Okay, cool, so this is going to be a bit of a speedy one today as I rattle through some of these hotkeys, but I think the most important place to start in Logic is with the Marquee Tool. Now this is your secondary tool here which you can select from this drop down, and so whenever you hold down Command you essentially access this tool. Now probably the thing I use this the most for is for chopping up regions, so if you hold Command and double click somewhere, rather than getting the razor tool you can just chop up both MIDI and audio regions really easily. Another thing you can do there, which is quite handy maybe for drum breaks and things like that, is you can chop evenly if you hold Command, Option and Shift all at the same time and then double click. It will slice this whole region up evenly to where you put that first slice. So if I chop it here, for instance, it will chop it evenly from that point. Another thing I love to do with the Marquee Tool is to copy and paste sections, so you can select by clicking and dragging and holding Command this whole area, and if I wanted to duplicate this I could press Command R and it would just copy it next door, or I could select a smaller range maybe and then copy that. Now what's happened here is it's done a weird thing where it's copied this whole MIDI region, so what I could do is chop that there with the Marquee Tool again and then paste that little section over. So it's a really handy arranging tool. And the last thing with the Marquee Tool is you can actually, if you just click in your region, you can use it to affect playback. So I can play, it actually overrides this cycle command. So with the cycle enabled, whenever I hit spacebar it will play from the start, but if I just click with my Marquee Tool I can play from this position by pressing spacebar, and I think this is in the settings somewhere. If you right click on this play button you can see play from marquee selection and play from cycle both ticked. Whilst we're on the topic of playback, there's actually one other thing I do all the time, which I'm sure a lot of you will know, is using Shift and Spacebar. If you select a region, you can select any region and press Shift Spacebar, and it will start playback from this region. What's also really cool is you can double click into this MIDI editor, and if you select a bunch of notes in here and then use Shift Spacebar, it will actually play from the selected notes. So it's really good when you're editing a long MIDI region. If you just want to hear a portion of it, rather than looping up this cycle range, which is also a really good thing to do, you can just hit Shift and Spacebar with certain notes selected to play them. One really common problem people often experience in Logic is when you're copying lots of patterns around, especially when you get into a big project, you'll have this thing where you've copied loads of things around and then they'll be slightly off. Maybe the smart snap tool hasn't worked properly, or there's a bit of audio that's run on too long that's thrown things off, and so you suddenly get these issues where all your playheads aren't aligning perfectly on the downbeat, like what's happening here. Now a good way to get around this is actually to just use this hotkey, which is the semicolon, and what it will do is snap the regions to your playhead. So you can snap stuff around and just put it bang on like a bar here and snap to it. It also saves you having to zoom in sometimes when you're copying like one audio region around and you're trying to precisely align it. You can actually just click the region and press the semicolon button and snap it to your playhead. So I use that one all the time as well. Another cool thing you can do with the playhead is use it to chop up regions. So if I select this region and just use the hotkey Command T, I can chop it at the playhead by moving the playhead around. But I would almost always use the Marquee Tool to do that, as I think it's a bit more effective. But where this is handy is if I wanted to say, I had a problem here where I wanted to chop these MIDI regions up at the same point, I could hold Shift and double click with the Command and Shift and double click with the Marquee Tool, or I could just have pressed Command T there. So you have two options for doing that. But one thing where this is really useful, this Command T hotkey at the playhead, is when you're trying to do that hip hop live chopping. So if you play like an audio region like I'm about to, you can hit this thing live and kind of chop up to the beat like you would sampling an old school hip hop track. And then you've got it all nicely sliced up, and it saves you having to go through and draw all those things with the Marquee tool and slice things up that way. Okay, cool. So I've got some great tips on cycle range as well. And I'm sure a lot of you will use this one where you can press U to cycle a region to the nearest bar, and then you can press Command U to cycle it precisely. What you can also obviously do is just left click and hold to make a selection in this cycle range up here. But what a lot of people don't use enough is this one where you can hold Command and then draw this cycle region here with these kind of black arrows on it. And what this will do is actually omit this area. So if I start playback from here, it will jump through, and it's good for when you're arranging and you want to know what it would sound like if you're maybe jumping to a later portion of your track. I do actually use that one quite a lot. I've also got a couple more insanely helpful tips with this cycle range, and the first one is to use this hotkey which is Shift L. So select all inside of locators. So you draw the area with the cycle range and you press Shift L to select it, and then I could very easily copy and paste that further down the timeline. Another really crazy one, which is just so handy, is if you make a selection with your cycle range and then click on a track, it will actually only select the regions inside of this cycle range. And you can obviously do this for multiple tracks by holding Shift or Command clicking to select them. And then I can copy them and move them around. So you have so much control when you learn to use this cycle range effectively. One trick that absolutely blows people's minds when I first show this to them is an absolute essential in Logic. And what it is in this mix options at the top here, you can see this setting called Auto Select Automation Parameter in read mode. Now what that means is if I press A to open up this automation viewer, and you can see this track is in read mode here, and all the tracks will come in read mode by default. What we can then do is open up any plugin that we have in this track and click a parameter. And can you see what it's selected on here? If I click mix, we're now affecting the round mix. If I click the decay, we're affecting the decay. And so you can draw in kind of points here in your automation window and for all the different lanes. So it's a way easier way, rather than having to look in this drop down and go to RAM and find the things to edit the parameters. It's a way easier way of getting to that point. Now what's also really useful in this automation window whilst we've got it open is you can use the Marquee tool to draw a selection. If you ever want to do kind of a step edit style automation where you're just editing a portion, you can edit like this, and I can move this one. So I use the Marquee tool a lot actually to do automation. Now the last thing that's really handy with automation is one thing is you can press Command Y to tab between, if you see here at the bottom it's got the used automation, so you can tab between whatever you've got going with Command Y. And then if you want to delete that whole lane just for this specific track you have selected, you can use the hotkey which is Control, Command and Backspace, and that will just delete that automation for that one parameter. So I can get rid of this one as well, and now I've got rid of all the automation on this track. Another really cool thing we can do to combine with this automation, auto select automation parameter in read mode setting is go and select the quick automation access, I think it's called, or something like that. If I come to automation, it's called automation quick access. Yeah. So what you can do is hit the learn message here, and if you've got a MIDI controller of any sort set up with Logic, hit learn and then move the parameter or the fader on the MIDI controller and then hit done. Now what this essentially is going to do is any plugin or parameter I select, even inside of a plugin, when I select it and I start moving this automation quick access tool, can you see the plugin moving? If I hit the decay, I can control the decay with automation quick access. Now Logic for me is sometimes a little bit buggy, as you can see, and it's not reading, it's not moving this value in here when I'm moving the mix here. So you get some visual stuff that makes you think it's not working. But if, for instance, I wanted to record a live take of me playing with this mix, and the way I would do this is another hotkey I use, which is Shift, Alt and Backspace. I've set this up to auto put latch on the selected track, so I can tab between read mode and latch mode, and then I can hit play and use this slider on my MIDI fader to affect the reverb amount. And then all I've got to remember to do is Shift Alt and the minus button I've set it up with, and it will put it back into read mode. So that automation is all printed in. The way to set up that hotkey is if you actually come into key commands and edit assignments, and yeah, you just type in latch here. I like to use latch mode a lot. I know people use touch mode as well, but if you kind of set your hotkey in this region, then you're all set up and ready to go. Another really good question is, what is the best way to slice up an audio region in Logic? And you actually have loads of options here. One very quick way is just to press Command F to open up this flex viewer, and then you can actually just hit this flex icon here, and this will show you all these transient points where Logic has automatically seen a transient. So you could go right click and slice at transient markers. Now the one thing about this method is it's not that accurate. Can you see there's a problem here where it's sliced this almost just wants to be one slice, and sometimes you'll also find it will slice not exactly at the right point. It will kind of slice off a bit of the intro, so I would have probably put this marker maybe back here somewhere. So it's not completely accurate, and I don't use it that much, but it is good if you're in a bit of a pinch to do something quickly. The other way I showed you before is either to command and double click with the Marquee tool to put slice markers in, or you can use the Playback tool, the Playhead, sorry, and press Command T to slice at the Playhead. Now one other method I don't see people using that much, but it is really handy, is you can click in here with the Marquee tool and just to draw that little direct line with the marquee, and then you can use your left and right arrows to move around this region and press minus to add the slices. So you can jump around. Now it is just jumping to where those transient points are, but it's also quite a handy method. So all of them are good, and maybe the last one, which I use the least, is to come into the audio editor, into file here, and if we're looking here, you can go audio file, detect transients, and so you can see them all in here, and then essentially come in and you can double click them to remove them, and you can drag them around like this. So you can also edit in here, and then when you come back to this tool again now, when you turn flex mode back on, you can hit slice at transient markers, and it will have done them more precisely because you've kind of realigned where Logic is seeing the transient markers. Okay, so we talked a little bit about putting in automation, but what about live recording parameters? This is essentially resampling and how we set this up in a DAW like Logic. It used to be very common to have, you probably can't see me, but some of these old samplers from the 90s, and it's a big thing in making jungle and drum and bass and music like that to live record moving parameters and to print it live rather than drawing in as automation or modulating them. So to set this up in Logic, what you essentially do is you have to send your channel to a bus. So the way I usually do this is send my track to bus 32. And then I alt click this wheel to just send it to kind of 0, 0. So it's sending the full amount from my channel to this bus. And then on the bus track, where it says stereo output, I'm going to send it to no output. Then what you've got to do is create a new audio track here, and then go bus and set the input of the audio track to bus 32. So we're essentially routing the output of this channel through a bus, and then we're recording it back into an audio track. It may sound complicated, but I think it'll make more sense when I start playing. So all I've got to then do is arm this audio track and hit record, the R button. And I can now record all this filter movement live. And if I play this audio region back now, it all comes through. So I definitely use this a lot, and sometimes I guess the good thing about this technique is it's all wrapped inside a Logic and you don't need any plugins, but it is a little bit complicated to set up. And one quicker solution that does use a plugin is this thing called Rolling Sampler by Bird Audio. And you can essentially just put this on a track, and then rather than having to send it to this bus and do all that stuff I just did, you can just hit play on the track, and it's going to record in like this. And then all you have to do is select that area and just click and drag it out into Logic. So I think both of them are very viable solutions if you're looking to do any resampling in Logic. Okay, so moving swiftly on to a couple of editing tools and hotkeys that are really handy. An absolute essential is this force legato one. And here I've got a bunch of MIDI notes. You can see some of them are overlapping, some of them haven't got enough length. If I want to have them all precisely fill the gaps until the next note, I can use this hotkey, which is shift and then backslash. And you can see they now perfectly kind of fit and legato from one note to the other. Now that's great in MIDI, but you can also do this in audio. Here I have this sample. If I want the sample to fill up the kind of gaps here and extend itself, I can also use this in audio to extend it. Another thing you might have experienced if you've ever bought Rex files into Logic is it will have these overlapping regions. So to go the other way as well, I can use this force legato hotkey to get rid of all that excess audio. Can you see this audio track's going on way too long? So to make them all fit nicely, I can just use that really quick hotkey and they all kind of align perfectly. Now I know in the newer versions of Logic there is a gain tool, and I even have the gain tool here where you can hit that gain tool and hold command and move this up and down, which is handy. But because I always have the Marquee tool selected, it's almost more annoying for me to do it that way. Maybe I could hold like G or something and set it up as a hotkey. But what I've been doing and have been doing for a long time is actually pressing Alt R. And I've set this as a hotkey to bring up this tab. You see how it's in this region tab in the left hand side? It kind of just pops it out for you and detaches it from where it is over on the left there. But this is a really handy little box to have. Not only can you open this drop down and do fades at the start and end, so control the fade amounts, fade type, but you can transpose this region up and down, and most importantly I can gain it up and down in here. And I find it a little bit handy. Even though they've brought in this gain tool, I still find myself going back and using the kind of tried and tested method of popping out this little window here. Now I've got to find, if I go into my settings, I'll find you what that actual key assignment looks like. So I think it will be the region. Here we go, region inspector float. So you need to assign that to a hotkey to make it pop out. Okay, so on to my final couple of tips, but still some really essential ones. And one thing, if you have a big sprawling project with hundreds of tracks, it can become pretty difficult to arrange it. Even if you do that trick I showed you earlier of making selections and using the hotkey Shift L to select everything inside the locators, it still becomes a bit clunky, sort of clicking, dragging all these things around. So what I do a lot of is with this, it's called the Toolbar. So if you click this icon to open up the Toolbar, I don't really use very much of this at all, apart from these section controls here. So a really great one is Insert Section. And this pop-up is dangerous. Whatever is happening with this pop-up, I don't quite understand it, but whenever you see it, you just want to cancel. Sometimes if you click OK and you're in a really big project, you can't then press Command Z to go back. It's also got these sections almost selected, so let's just undo that again. And if you press it again, see now it's worked properly. So I'm not sure if that's a bug or not with Logic, but it's a real dangerous thing to watch out for. So I'm glad that happened and I was able to show you that. So I'll use this insert section thing a lot. Obviously the cut section is really handy as well for just removing a portion. And then the repeat section is great as well. So, you know, another way to do that would be to go Shift L and then press Command R. But can you see it's not like added another region. When you repeat section, it shuffles everything along. So these tools for arranging are amazing. And the final thing, which you should all be doing in your Logic projects, is using project alternatives. And rather than pressing Save As and renaming the project something different, whenever you make a big change, maybe you're doing something creative and you're not sure how it's going to pan out, or you're going to start mixing the track, anything like that, when you take a big step forwards in your tune, It's very creatively freeing actually to go project alternatives, new alternative, and then maybe I'll just call this mix. And then I just save over. And you can then, if you ever need to jump back, you can just jump back to a previous alternative. So that is basically all of my Logic tips, and I've rattled through a whole bunch there, but hopefully there's some useful ones in there for you, and you can all use them to supercharge your own workflows. So thank you very much, and I will catch you very soon back on my channel. Peace.